A dead planet, a long-lost civilization, a vault buried in sand, untouched for millennia. When Solara activates its secrets, she isn't prepared for what she'll find, or how it will change everything humanity understands about survival and memory. Welcome back, traveler. Before we set course tonight, take a second to anchor us. A thumbs up or a comment is like a signal ping through the void. It lets me know someone's out there. And if you feel like journeying with us again, subscribing opens the hatch to all future missions. Dim the lights. Get comfortable. Tonight, we drift into the unknown. Let's begin. Chapter 1: The Isolation of Deep Space. Space isn't just quiet. It's the kind of silence that becomes a presence all its own. It presses in from every direction, filling the gaps where sound and movement would otherwise keep you anchored to something familiar. After weeks, even months, that absence can start to feel like its own kind of gravity. So what does it mean to exist alone in that silence? That's the question Solara Anwen lives with every waking moment of her mission. Solara is a deep space field archivist aboard the long-range survey vessel SSV Equinox. Her job is neither glamorous nor thrilling. It's precise, careful work, meant to preserve fragments of history from civilizations that no longer exist. Her ship, the Equinox, is compact and efficient, a metallic cocoon of blinking consoles, storage compartments, and colorless corridors designed for one. It hums faintly as she moves about, but otherwise it's still. She's been alone for 91 days now, charting lightless star systems, scanning dead planets, and tagging their remains. She's the type of person who prefers it that way. Weeks in isolation are easier when you can treat each day like another line item in a checklist. Her routines are as exact as the equipment she handles. Each morning begins the same, waking to the programmed chime of the ship's internal clock, preparing the nutrient packs that serve as her meals, performing diagnostics on the Equinox's aging hardware. Her tasks have a rhythm, a predictability that keeps the days evenly measured out. The scanning procedures, the sample logging, even the brief daily notes she records for her mission's voice log, everything has its place. In theory, there's no room for idle thoughts or distractions in the emptiness beyond her ship. Mission protocol demands precision, and Solara has always followed it without question. The Stellar Archives initiative expects its field agents to prioritize data collection, to keep themselves detached from anything that might compromise their work, and why wouldn't they? Attachment serves little purpose when your sole responsibility is to catalogue the skeletons of forgotten worlds. That emotional distance is as much a tool as her scanning array or atmospheric sampler. It keeps her mind focused. Or at least, that's the plan. But 91 days of silence leaves its mark, no matter how disciplined she is. Over time, her spoken logs have grown shorter, her tone flatter. When she first departed, the recordings held traces of curiosity, even a touch of excitement. "Survey period 2, she'd said, clear and decisive into the mic. Tracing remnants of ionized gas halos from planetary debris fields, possible mineral deposits detected, marking for later analysis. Now, though, her voice barely rises above monotone. Numeric codes and technical notation have replaced full sentences. There's no audience waiting to hear these logs, after all. Only the possibility that one day, centuries from now, someone might skim them in search of useful data. There's a deeper challenge here, one Solara doesn't put into words. Psychologists have written widely on the effects of prolonged isolation in extreme conditions, whether in polar research stations, submarine missions, or simulated Mars habitats. For astronauts, the vacuum of space isn't just a physical absence, but a psychological one, too. Researchers have documented how loneliness can distort the mind, dull emotion, and blur that intangible sense of time passing. Even the most rigorous training doesn't make anyone immune. It just teaches them how to endure it, to turn the vast nothingness into white noise. Inside the Equinox, the emptiness is rarely broken. She entertains herself with simulated reading material, sometimes replaying old classical pieces stored in the ship's database. Beethoven's Symphony No. 9 echoes faintly from her speakers on some nights, less for enjoyment and more to remind herself what life feels like when it moves in sweeping, dramatic arcs. But the music ends, always. It ends, and the familiarity of solitude settles back over her like the weightless air. She hasn't dreamed in months. She isn't sure if it's something her mind has chosen to do, or if it's the result of her data-driven focus pulling her deeper into monotony. Reality, after all, is enough to keep her occupied. As her ship drifts closer to its next destination, the Adhara system, Solara busies herself with preliminary scans. Adhara has been flagged in stellar archive databases as a sterile system, a stripped, lifeless place left behind by its dying star. The fourth planet, Adhara IV, is listed as potentially significant only because of fractured records describing ancient surface structures. She doesn't expect to find anything original there. If prior missions couldn't extract meaningful data, it's unlikely hers will be any different. But still, protocol requires her to log the scans, land a probe if necessary, and move on. The automated star charts project Adhara IV onto her main console, its surface reflected as a pale beige sphere, faintly textured by jagged contours. The planet looks every bit as tired as its reputation would suggest, a dry, wind-worn husk orbiting a faintly glowing star. Her hands move over the controls with mechanical ease, submitting commands to align a deep-range scan. Every motion pencils in another mark on her timeline, already planned days in advance. For all she knows, the system will turn out to be nothing more than ancient dust and crumbling stone. And yet, she lingers on the image a moment longer than needed, her fingers hesitating over the controls. She can't quite place it, that feeling just beneath her professional exterior. A wordless thought brushing up against the edges of her mind. Could be nothing, could be intuition, but it's there, complicating the clean lines of her internal logic. She shakes her head, brushes it aside. Curiosity is part of why she joined the Stellar Archives in the first place, but it's a fine line between curiosity and distraction. Adhara IV is dead. The records say so, the visual scans confirm it. A sweep of the fourth planet's orbit will close this chapter and send her to the next waypoint. The controls flash with confirmation as the probe prepares for orbit insertion. Aside from the hum of stabilizers kicking in, her ship remains quiet. She doesn't let herself think too much about the faint twist of anticipation stirring beneath her ribs. Hadn't she lived with a similar feeling on the first day of this mission? On her very first planetary descent? Maybe. She isn't sure anymore. Still, something about Adhara nags at her. Before the star began to dim, before the planets hardened into parched desert worlds, someone had lived here. They built stone towers, they etched symbols somewhere into its desolate rock. The fragmented database entries don't explain who or how or why. And the emptiness wrapped around this modest star system doesn't tell her whether any of it mattered. Perhaps in the quiet, her mind is simply reaching for meaning in places that don't have it. Or perhaps the planet is waiting, just as she is, each playing their roles in a moment yet to happen. Adhara itself, stagnant as it appears, doesn't quite match the sterile finality plastered across its files. Maybe it's the visuals, winds that seem too persistent for a world this forgotten, or the strange intricacies of those structures kept vague in archival descriptions. The planet offers up nothing of certainty, only enough half-whispered anomalies to spark doubt in her otherwise rigid expectations. But for now, she sticks to her task. The scan is her job. The what-ifs are not. Between her sense of protocol and her quiet impulses lies a stillness that Solara doesn't fully acknowledge. It's neither dread nor excitement, but a familiar midpoint of suspended emotion, just as empty as the void pressing against her ship's reinforced hull. Still, at times like this, some part of her wonders, not in words but in faint, fleeting questions, whether silence is ever truly as complete as it seems. Chapter 2. A Whisper from the Void. The scan begins like every other. Solara monitors her display, watching as the probe closes in on Adhara IV's orbit. The ship's automated systems handle the technical work, pulling data from the faint impressions left by radiation and light. Everything seems routine. Atmospheric density, surface temperatures, mineral compositions. It's all logged with clean precision as the Equinox hums softly in the background. Adhara IV, true to its records, offers little to spark interest. The atmosphere falls within projected oxygen depletion thresholds, and the spectral analysis confirms a history of solar deterioration. Dust and dry winds dominate the planetary profile. In other words, dead, just as expected. But then, something cuts through the quiet. A shift, so faint it could almost be mistaken for interference. A tremor in the data feed, subtle but persistent. Solara leans forward, brushing through the display settings. For a moment, she suspects the probe's instruments are out of calibration. Slight errors can occur in long-range scans. But no, the signal remains, picking at the edge of the spectrum. It's almost imperceptible, yet distinct enough to stand apart from the random background noise of space. What she's picking up feels like a pulse, faint and rhythmic. As the signal continues, it grows clearer, tightening into an organized pattern. Solara adjusts the receivers manually, narrowing the filter, and the irregular noise reduces into something deliberate, something transmitting. Not consistently, not loudly, but enough that it becomes undeniable. "No way," she mutters under her breath, her voice cutting through the oppressive silence of the Equinox. When the probe locks onto the source, the analysis comes through in precise figures. The signal repeats itself in cycles, structured around prime numbers. Prime numbers, the building blocks of mathematics, universal to any intelligent species. It's a staple of theoretical science in the search for alien life. Prime number sequences would indicate deliberate intent, an effort to communicate while bypassing potential language barriers. The moment she sees the pattern, Solara feels her breath tighten, her mind racing to put the pieces together. But the data doesn't stop there. Her console begins translating embedded text within the signal. The decoded message is short, eerily concise. "We are not gone. We are waiting." Solara sits frozen for a moment, staring at the playback. Signals like this, especially from systems marked as sterilized by cosmic decay, are nothing short of extraordinary. And, more importantly, statistically improbable. Everything about the Adhara system should be silent. That's the word her mind keeps circling back to. Silent, empty, finished. Yet here it is. A faint, repeating whisper that defies its surroundings. It speaks not loudly, but directly. And something about the phrasing strikes her. "We are not gone. We are waiting." It isn't just a declaration. It feels intentional, almost intimate. Not a cry into the void, but a message meant to be found. Her training presses hard against her instincts. The Stellar Archives Initiative has protocols for anomaly tagging, and those protocols frame her actions now. Procedure dictates she record the anomaly, mark its coordinates, and leave further investigation to future missions better equipped for potential encounters. Any deviation creates risk. Technical risks, resource risks, even personal safety risks. She recites these rules to herself, a mantra she's relied on throughout her career. It's what keeps the work objective, untangled from speculation or emotion. Yet sitting here with those words illuminated on her screen, words that insist someone or something left them behind, the voice of her training begins to dull against the edges of her own curiosity. She combs through the signal again, searching for inconsistencies. No interference, no false echoes. The numbers remain a constant, and the message repeats like a quiet pulse. Solara tries to imagine what could create something like this. An automated beacon, a relic of an extinct civilization? These possibilities align. Maybe the system once held life that developed enough to encode a final warning or a farewell. That thought steadies her, grounding the signal's strangeness within her fieldwork's established framework. But the text itself complicates the theory. We are waiting. Waiting for what, or whom? Humanity has long speculated on encounters like these. The concept of prime number signals isn't new. It's featured heavily in the philosophy of extraterrestrial intelligence. Scientists on Earth have proposed using them as universal markers in SETI, search for extraterrestrial intelligence, communications, precisely because their mathematical roots transcend cultural or linguistic boundaries. Any form of life advanced enough to develop technology would likely recognize the sequence as synthetic, deliberate. But the story shifts drastically when the reverse happens, when humanity isn't the sender but the recipient. For Solara, this idea takes on weight, now in a way it never did during recorded lectures or simulations. That kind of abstract theorizing feels distant compared to what she's experiencing now. This ghost of numbers pressing against her ears in the moment, fragile but very real. The Equinox runs its secondary analysis, scanning for faint energy readings around Adhara IV. The system responds sluggishly, but captures enough information for a basic projection. The signal isn't coming from orbit, as she initially assumed, but instead originates from somewhere on the planet's surface, localized deep within the fourth quadrant. Solara quickly overlays the data against early archive records about the ruined towers seen from long-range imagery. Though degraded, those structural remnants cluster near the signal's coordinates. Her screen floods with layers of static and details, all of which point to a single conclusion. Whatever sent the transmission isn't extraterrestrial interference. Its origin lies directly beneath Adhara IV's sands. She knows what she's supposed to do. The report entry she drafts in her head is simple, clinical. Planetary surface scan successful, unexpected artifact detected, transmission coordinates flagged for archival review, orbital status, no further action taken. It would take less than a full cycle to log everything and move on to the next waypoint, leaving only trace documentation for future teams to analyze. Any other field archivist would call that a successful resolution, and the thought of completing her task with no unnecessary deviations should comfort her. It doesn't. Instead, that whisper lingers. For all its faintness, it feels personal, in ways her many encounters with decayed planetary systems never have. Perhaps it's because the signal reaches her at a time when her mind is starved of anything beyond calculation. Perhaps deep down, she knows the context doesn't matter. It's the act of waiting, of being found, that presses most on her thoughts. Rationally, Solara understands the risks of exploratory deviation. If she attempts planetary descent and something damages the probe, there's no convenient support ship waiting nearby to salvage her mission. She'd be on her own to recover from malfunction. The Equinox carries enough supplies for near-term survival, but protocol exists for a reason. These decisions aren't hers to make lightly. And yet, the idea of leaving this message unanswered gnaws at her in a way no calculation can resolve. Her fingers hover over the controls, ready to flag the anomaly and begin writing the clean, detached report that would preserve her spotless record. But just as she moves to confirm the tag, something sharp presses past her boundaries of habit and careful thought. It's fragile, born somewhere in her human core. That need to understand something bigger than schedules and numbers. Something buried beneath layers of sand and years. We are not gone, we are waiting. The voice hums louder in her mind than it ever appeared on her readouts. Her pulse quickens, a brief wave of heat lingering at the top of her neck. She switches off the preliminary tag and reopens the scan coordinates for Adhara IV's fourth quadrant. Normally in moments like this, she'd remind herself why the Stellar Archive's rules of engagement exist, to keep field agents professional by leaving their curiosity at the periphery. But it's this same curiosity that answers her now. In the stillness around her, the question slowly takes shape, as inevitable as sunrise. What if the waiting isn't endless? What if it's for you? Her hand shifts on the controls, sending a command to prepare the descent modules. The ship's systems blink in response, and Solara begins keying in the parameters for surface landing. She isn't certain what she'll find, or if her decision will yield anything at all. What she does know, however, is this: the signal demands more than silence. Whatever left that message meant for someone to listen, to hear its faint whisper through the void where thought and memory seem lost. And Solara, detached, methodical Solara, has spent 91 days in isolation, listening to nothing. It's time, she thinks, for her to answer. Chapter 3. The Ruins of Adhara IV. The planet comes into view as Solara's descent module breaches the upper atmosphere. From a distance, Adhara IV resembles a forgotten canvas. Muted browns and faded greys stretch endlessly beneath a thin, turbulent sky. It's a world erased by time, left behind by the processes that once gave it life. Even here, touching down on its surface, there's almost nothing to distinguish one stretch of terrain from another. Wind carves through sand-worn rock formations, tossing faint drifts of dust that scatter across the barren expanse. It's a loud sort of quiet, the kind that echoes itself back in unsettling ways. This place is empty, but it refuses to feel still. Solara's landing gear settles into the brittle soil with a soft crunch. From the ship's viewport, she surveys the surroundings, hazy orange light spilling across a landscape broken by jagged outlines of ruins. Faint ridges rise and fall like the spines of some buried beast, while corroded architecture flickers in and out of focus as wind carries sand across her view. She activates her suit, carefully sealing each layer before stepping down the ramp. The air tastes of dry minerals and decay through her helmet's filtration system. It isn't breathable. Her ship detected that long before she descended. But there's something about its tang that feels heavier than she expected. Her boots leave shallow imprints behind as she moves forward, each step crunching against compacted sand. Adhara IV's sun is weaker now, its faded rays barely managing to stretch warm fingers over the planet's surface. In the cooler shadows, nothing moves. Nothing stirs. There are no calls of life, no whirs of mechanical remnants, no soft echoes of wind against inner chambers. The ruins seem to swallow sound entirely, turning the landscape into more void than place. The closest structures tower awkwardly, their shapes alien, but also oddly familiar. She stops in the shadow of one, its surface pitted and streaked by centuries of harsh weathering. The material seems metallic at first glance, though prolonged exposure to the elements has left it faintly brittle in appearance. There's no clear symmetry here, no sign of straightforward design. Arches collapse into themselves, cylinders lean at faint but impossible angles. She runs a scanner along one fragment, noting its composition. Time and elements have stripped away much of the layer expected to protect such architecture, leaving behind raw seams of the material consumed slowly where the structure combated the worst storms. As she walks further into the ruins, the silence presses against her. Something about this city, or what's left of it, feels uncomfortably intentional. Crumbled stone and alien metal pieces scatter the ground beneath her feet, but the absence of disarray catches her attention. There are no collapsed walls suggesting panic, no patterns of debris indicating sudden conflict. It's less destruction as it is gradual surrender, the kind of decay that arrives when there's no one left to intervene. This wasn't a battlefield. It wasn't an evacuation point. It feels more like a place where something chose to let itself fade, steadily, into nothing. As her scanner shifts focus, light from her suit glances over glyphs faintly engraved into one wall's surviving surface. The patterns are dense, etched at angles and intersections so intricate she can't hold their shapes fully in her mind all at once. The scanner struggles to translate any meaning from them, stuttering over data feedback corrupted by the erosion covering parts of their inscriptions. Still, just looking at them stirs a sense of unease. They give away nothing about the lives that created them, nothing about the minds that must have labored to construct what's now erased here. Even the glyphs look hollow, carved marks waiting for voices that haven't remained. Adhara IV's ruins aren't like any she's catalogued before. Many sites crumble, many civilizations leave traces of chaos as resources dwindle or conflicts bring fractures too sharp to contain. But this world feels vacant in a different way. It feels swept over, not violently, just deliberately, as though the process of emptying it happened with great care. Chapter 4. The Vault Beneath the Sands. Solara traces the signal to a fissure in the desert floor, a narrow ridge hidden under layers of drifting sand. By the time she finds the entrance, her environmental sensors confirm what's already obvious. The opening has been sealed for longer than she can calculate. The structure embedded into the ground is weathered, its surface etched with glyphs similar to the ones she had seen earlier. Alien remnants peek out at odd angles. Where the rock crumbles away, parts of the material gleam faintly, like petrified veins of metal woven into the stone. But the glyphs are what hold her attention. Their intricate lines intersect in patterns that almost seem deliberate, as though they form edges of something she can't quite decipher. Standing before the entrance, she feels an unmistakable pull, a sense of being watched, even surrounded, though the planet remains as empty as ever. Her gloved hand brushes along the edge of the metallic entrance panel. It's cool to the touch, textured by grooves and symbols eroded into soft ridges over millennia. Any organic materials once part of its design have long since disintegrated, leaving behind only what the harsh environment couldn't wear away. There's no clear way in, no markings that suggest a mechanism to slide apart the barrier. Whatever locking system had existed here was built to last, sealed with the same deliberate and eerie silence that defines the ruins above. But Solara isn't without tools. Her suit's utility module cracks the surface open after a series of directed energy pulses. It takes time, more than she feels comfortable with, as fragile echoes of the shifting metal radiate into the air. When the opening finally gives way, a rush of stale insulation pours out, thick and heavy, like the breath of something that's been holding its lungs for 1,000 years. She steps inside cautiously, her flashlight illuminating the passage ahead. The air grows stale as she moves deeper, her footsteps muted by the unnerving acoustics of the structure. Her light bounces against walls reinforced with fossilized cables that twist and converge along the ceiling like dry roots. Strange, artificial veins appear to run through the cracked surfaces, their visual textures faintly crystalline and almost translucent in patches where her light lingers. These cables extend deep into the vault, disappearing into the rock as though the entire structure had long ago grown together with the planet itself. It feels less like technology and more like anatomy, the petrified remains of a living, breathing place. Every step deepens the strange sense of waiting. The glyphs on the walls now seem burned into the material, their patterns becoming denser, almost frenetic. She pauses, letting her scanner sweep their surfaces, though the output remains hopelessly incomplete. Without any direct reference or key, her ship's AI can't parse out whether these shapes represent a language, an art form, or something entirely beyond human understanding. Still, there's an undeniable rhythm to them, a repetition buried within their complexity. Like the signal she detected above, they radiate intent, even if their meaning is locked away. The chamber opens as she moves further inside. A circular space emerges from the narrowing corridor, its edges faintly crumbling. The walls are carved from the same alien stone-like material, marked by deep etchings that spiral upward into the darkness. At the center of the room is a massive, rounded terminal. It rises out of the floor like it's grown there, dust and crystalline residue layering its surface. The structure is dormant, lifeless, its panels long since dulled by time. Whatever powered this place shut down long ago. Solara approaches carefully, the faint static of her scanners humming against the overwhelming quiet. She crouches to brush sand and particles off the terminal's surface, her gloves gathering a pale, powdery film. Intricate carvings run along its edges, small grooves where residue has crystallized into spiny, coarse ridges. The markings look purposeful, but their patterns defy immediate understanding. There's no clear indication of how she might activate it, if it can even still function. The question gnaws at her. Clearly, the transmission must have originated here or somewhere nearby. But if this terminal is dead, then she's staring at the last remaining fragment of its story, with no way to read it. Yet something about the room feels unnervingly intact, despite the extended decay. The fossilized cables from earlier continue into the space, spiraling upward and connecting to cavities in the walls above. Each line intersects and converges around the room's edges, as though feeding into the very terminal she now stands before. The design feels deliberate, vast, and interconnected, nothing like human technology, which tends toward modular efficiency. The layout here suggests that the lines between life, structure, and machine blurred on Adhara IV in ways human thought hasn't touched. Solara lowers her scanner to the terminal's base, restarting a diagnostic sequence to assess any lingering energy output. Much of the data remains ambiguous, a wide margin of error due to time and environmental wear. But as the scanner completes its sweep, a new result appears. A faint glimmer of activity registers deep within the terminal, buried beneath layers of dormant systems. It's weak, a signal so close to failure that it barely pings her device. But it's there, the smallest spark of potential locked away in whatever ancient technology this is. Her breath catches in her chest. Like the glyphs, like the cables, the buried electricity hums with the same intent she felt in the signal above. It's waiting. That thought crystallizes within her, strong, unavoidable. Intuition propels her forward. She adjusts her equipment, rerouting enough power from her suit to awaken the dormant terminal. It's risky. This system wasn't built with sensitive alien mechanisms in mind. A misstep might cause irreparable damage, but her curiosity outweighs hesitation. Deep down, she knows she didn't come here to leave things quiet. The moment she connects, the vault brims with a faint electric hum. At first, only a few scattered lights flicker along the terminal's base, small pinpricks of blue that pulse hesitantly. Then, as more power cycles through, the whole structure begins to illuminate, etched lines glowing faintly as energy flows through circuits buried deep within the walls. The petrified cables seem to shiver ever so slightly, as though responding to the resurgence of something long dormant. It's a strange, stark contrast, the ancient walls, worn to near collapse, now pulsing with a quiet, modern life. Suddenly, the hologram appears. It's a fractured, wavering projection. Its form is skewed, its movement uneven. But it's enough to tell Solara that it wasn't a machine that spoke through the signal. The figure, humanoid but unmistakably alien, adjusts within its display. Its body appears crystalline in nature, its translucent surface refracting faint light from the glowing terminal. It doesn't have a distinct face in the human sense. Its features are angular and geometric, like something evolved around light and reflection rather than flesh. And yet, when the projection speaks, its voice echoes with a strange warmth. It feels near human, though layered with tonal shifts and chords that make it ring musical, foreign. I am Ethaean. The name carries a rich weight, as though it was meant to leave an imprint. I was a scientist, from before. The hologram's speech flickers, fragments cutting through its projection like static. It speaks as if recovering a memory that was nearly lost. Solara doesn't interrupt, doesn't react outwardly. Inside, though, her every sense is alive. Ethaean explains that the Ceteri, the species who lived here, faced an extinction event long ago. Their biosphere faltered, collapsing under a series of cascading failures. Resources dwindled, systems failed. They didn't flee or attempt to relocate their civilization elsewhere in the cosmos. Instead, they pooled their remaining efforts into preserving what mattered most. Not bodies, but culture. They created this vault to house their neural lattice, a network meant to encode thought, memory, and identity. A way to hold who they were, even as their planet decayed around them. The Ceteri encoded everything they could: their art, their music, their language. They wove pieces of themselves into the lattice's digital threads, layering meaning into patterns as old as themselves. But the lattice could only hold so much, and as their final days approached, they locked it away. letting it fall silent. They chose not to leave physical remnants of their people in the ruins above. Instead, their species focused everything on creating a message that could endure, waiting, in time and now, even in whispers. The hologram freezes as Ethaean's words slow into fragments, repeating phrases from earlier, cycling before the power dims. Solara stares at the projection, unsure whether what she's seen is a memory, an imprint, or an echo drifting endlessly inside its fragile systems. What she does know is one thing: the Citari didn't disappear entirely. They sculpted this vault into an artifact of waiting, preserving the most vital part of their existence for someone, or anyone, willing to listen. Chapter 5. The Final Days of the Citari. What would you preserve if you knew your entire world was about to disappear? Your traditions, your art, the sound of your voice? Ethan's hologram flickers, barely stable, but the strain in the voice feels tangible, almost human. Its story unfolds in fragments, broken by static, as though the vault itself struggles to recall the full details. That struggle, though, makes the narrative even sharper, weightier. This wasn't just a decision the Citari faced, it was their last act as a people. Adhara IV wasn't always barren. It thrived once, cradled under Adhara's star, a biosphere perfectly tuned for its inhabitants. The Citari called it home, translucent crystalline beings whose forms refracted sunlight into faint shimmering hues that lit their cities like faint prisms. They did not grow on a world of vast oceans or endless green forests. Instead, their landscapes were rugged, their soil peppered with crystalline formations and vistas that stretched into dramatic cliff faces. Ethaean describes the cities that emerged here: great webbed structures suspended across canyon walls, held together by shimmering materials that seemed to channel sunlight. They didn't just build, they fused their lives with the planet itself, reflecting the Citari's deep desire to live in harmony with their environment. But harmony is fragile. Ethan recounts how their biosphere faltered. It began slowly, an imbalance in atmospheric cycles, temperatures rising in ways the Citari had no precedent to understand. The crystalline trees that filtered their air became brittle, collapsing one by one until their forests turned to fragile ruins. The signals of collapse had been there all along, rippling faintly beneath the surface of their thriving cities, but by the time the Citari recognized the magnitude of the threat, it was too late. Their planet became hostile to the very materials they relied on to survive. Adhara IV, once brilliant and thriving, began to wither. There is no bitter tone to Ethaean's description of this process. There isn't regret either, just a strange resignation, as though the Citari had accepted Adhara IV's fate as closely intertwined with their own. What came next, though, was a decision that defined their final days. The Citari were an intelligent species, advanced in their applications of memory storage and light-encoded neural technology. They could have fled. They had the means to build great vessels and send fragments of themselves across the stars, searching for a softer world to call home. Fleeing, Ethaean explains, was possible. Remaining, however, was preservation. To the Citari, survival meant something beyond physical existence. Their people had always placed value in their culture, not just in its artifacts, but in its intricacies: the music, the language, the way sunlight would refract through the last crystalline forests. That, they believed, was worth preserving when all else was lost. Instead of running, they focused their energy inward. They abandoned the idea of ships and colonies and brought their brightest minds together to construct the lattice, a neural network designed to encode their essence as a species inside the vault Solara now stands within. They wove their memories into it: images, ideas, music, emotions. The lattice would hold it all, like a living artifact waiting to be rediscovered. And here, Ethan's voice stumbles slightly, flickering along with the hologram. Their technology, advanced as it was, could only hold so much. It couldn't preserve their forms or consciousness entirely, just the cultural fragments that gave meaning to their lives. The emotional weight of this choice lingers in the air. They knew it wouldn't save them. They also knew there would likely be no one there to activate this archive for many lifetimes, if ever. "We chose to encode meaning before form," Ethaean says softly, the statement clinging to the silence. It wasn't just a legacy they left behind, it was what they considered the truest mirror of their identity: memory, creativity, connection. The lattice became both tomb and time capsule. Solara's mind spins as she listens. It's impossible not to draw parallels between the Cetari's story and Earth's current legacies. On Earth, civilizations have risen and fallen throughout history. Some collapsed suddenly due to war or conquest, while others crumbled under environmental strain. The Mayans, for example, faced agricultural failures tied to drought, destabilizing their once great cities. Similarly, deforestation and resource depletion hastened the end of Easter Island's community, leaving behind massive, storyless statues. Ethion's recounting of their fading biosphere brings to mind these echoes. How vulnerable even the most advanced societies become when their environment turns. Science projects that human societies, too, must reckon with global challenges like climate change, where rising seas and failing ecosystems threaten pieces of culture too large to measure. The Cetari, though, didn't simply watch as their biosphere faltered. They acted, and their actions were elegiac in scope. Still, Solara wonders whether they had regrets. She studies the faint light of the hologram, the swaying figure marred by distortion. How it must have felt to hear the last refrains of their music, knowing they themselves wouldn't be there to carry it forward, to encode something ephemeral into fragile permanence. Ethion acknowledges this with one final comment before the flickering voice breaks completely. To preserve is to hope, even when hope is unreachable. The hologram wavers, its projection losing cohesion, and Solara's focus shifts back to the terminal. With the Cetari's story fading into incomplete fragments, her eyes land on a prompt embedded in the terminal's display. She hardly notices herself reading the text aloud. Initiate retrieval attempt. It's an option, clear but deceptively simple. The lattice might still hold the compressed volumes of Cetari memory and legacy waiting to be decoded, but initiating that process could come at a cost. Without fully understanding the state of its systems, Solara knows that forcing a retrieval could destabilize what remains. In the worst-case scenario, it could fracture the lattice's lattice entirely, wiping out whatever survives inside. It's a moment of pause, sharp, quiet, and almost suffocating. The weight of this decision presses on her. Everything about her training screams at her to leave it untouched. Her mission wasn't about taking risks or making repairs. She is here to observe, to catalogue, not intervene. Risking the fragile legacy of an entire civilization isn't within her authority. She should walk away, report her findings, and leave the vault sealed for future missions. But the Cetari didn't encode this vault to be ignored. They didn't write those glyphs, create this lattice, and leave their memories drifting as whispers through space for someone to say, "Not today." Their choices feel impossibly human in nature, declaring that their voices, songs, and children's laughter deserved better than the static silence the universe would otherwise enforce. Solara rests her hand against the terminal's surface. If she proceeds, she has no guarantees. She risks overloading the lattice, potentially erasing everything the vault contains. But every part of her feels the weight of Ethion's message. Part of her training, part of her humanity, knows there are moments where protocol isn't enough. Preservation isn't just about cold cataloging, it's about understanding what you carry forward and what it means to the present. Her mind drifts to Earth again. What would humanity choose to preserve in the face of collapse? Already, societies archive languages, endangered music, and the blueprints of ancient ruins in hopes that future generations might hold fragments of understanding. Initiatives like the Global Music Vault aim to secure databases of cultural recordings beneath Arctic ice, protecting art from global disasters. Even now, preservation feels like defiance, a declaration that long after bodies fade and cities crumble, something beautiful will endure. In light of that, the Cetari's decision doesn't seem strange. It feels inevitable, vital. Solara stares down at the glowing prompt. She can't know what initiating the sequence will awaken, whether it will glimpse only fragments of who the Cetari were or implode entirely under the strain of time. Another field archivist might weigh it differently, might find the risk too reckless. But in this moment, amidst the silence of the vault and the ghost of Ethaean's story echoing in her thoughts, Solara knows her decision. Her fingers hover briefly, hesitating for the space of a breath. Then she presses the command, and the terminal pulses, slowly flooding the chamber with light. Chapter 6. Activating the lattice. Solara's gloved fingers hover above the command console, the faint hum of the terminal spreading across the room like the intake of a deep breath. The glyphs etched into the walls pulse faintly, slivers of light racing through fossilized cables as though carrying whispers to places long forgotten. She initiates the retrieval sequence, and in an instant, the room comes alive in a way that feels almost impossible. The effect is subtle at first. The terminal's lights brighten, tracing delicate circuits beneath its crystalline surface. Solara's ship systems, still tethered to her visor, flare with activity, overlapping data streams scrolling faster than her eyes can track. For a moment, she wonders if her connection will hold under the strain, but the tether stabilizes, barely. A low-frequency hum reverberates through the chamber, growing stronger as the retrieval begins. It comes from everywhere at once, resonating deep in her chest like it's carried on more than just sound. And then there's the first flicker of something else. At the edges of her vision, the space around her seems to twist. Not physically, but perceptually. Like light refracted through a broken lens, without warning, Solara is flooded with fragments of a world she doesn't recognize. It feels like falling into a memory that isn't hers, the boundaries of the vault dissolving until she's standing in an entirely new place. There's no transition, no slow shift. She is simply there. In the simulated space, sunlight arcs through the sky in impossible hues, casting a pale pink glow over the environment. An alien city rises before her, achingly beautiful yet utterly foreign. Towering structures stretch like crystalline vines toward the horizon, shifting faintly as though breathing with the planet itself. The ground beneath her feet pulses faintly with iridescent light, responding to her movements in ways she doesn't understand. Through the haze of artificial memory, faint voices echo. They're not words she can comprehend, but they carry tones that feel undeniably alive. Laughter drifts through the air, clear and buoyant, carried above the background hum of daily life. In flashes, she sees figures darting between the city's suspended pathways, shimmering beings balanced on uneven edges, their translucent forms refracting the sunlight into scattered dancing prisms. Children, all with 4 hands, race through a crystal forest, their voices rising in playful tones that cut sharply against the immense stillness Solara has grown so used to. The trees around them catch the light, their crystalline leaves casting rainbows that scatter like specks of fire into the atmosphere. In those fleeting blinks, this world doesn't feel like an archive or an echo. It feels alive, achingly alive. For Solara, the moment is intoxicating and dizzying in equal measure. The imagery is less like observing and more like immersion, as though the Ceteri lattice doesn't just show their memories, but invites her inside them. It's not a perfect reconstruction. Parts of the simulation flicker, scenes stuttering at their edges or fracturing into shards of light. But the emotion in it all, that's real. Through her gut, through her skin, she can feel the vibrancy of the Ceteri as a people, their joy, their sheer awe for the world they built. The neural lattice was designed precisely for this. Scientists on Earth have speculated about similar capabilities in neural networks, though humanity has barely touched the surface of what's possible. Artificial neural networks today are mathematical frameworks capable of storing patterns, mimicking how biological brains process information. They recognize faces, generate plausible images from scratch, or predict how human speech evolves. But far future neural design, like what the Ceteri achieved, could go so much deeper. By encoding not just knowledge, but experience, the sights, sounds, and feelings of everyday life, a culture could preserve itself in ways current archives can barely conceive. What Solara experiences now isn't just data extracted from algorithms. It's the distilled memories of beings long gone, wrapped and stored until she pressed the sequence. The simulation begins to shift. Her surroundings flicker, the sounds fading like echoes chased into silence. The vivid cityscape around her softens, dissolving back into the dim light of the vault. The crystalline trees, the laughter, the brilliance of the alien sun, it all falls away into darkness, leaving only the glow of the terminal before her. For a brief, disorienting moment, she feels completely adrift, the loss weighing heavier than she expects. It isn't just the end of the dreamlike world, it's the abrupt absence of their voices, their sounds, the hum of their lives. She takes a shaky breath. Her visor blinks faintly, realigning itself with the present. But as she readjusts, her ship starts lighting up with new activity. Compressed streams of data flood into her systems, transmitted directly from the terminal's lattice. Solara skims the emerging files, though there are too many to process at once. Language banks, visual imagery, patterns of light encoded like mathematics, entire streams of recorded symphonies registered in bursts of digital playback. These aren't exploratory fragments, they're whole pieces, layer upon layer of Citari culture stored and encoded into the lattice's algorithms. Her audio systems crackle softly before stabilizing, and then it begins. A haunting, otherworldly melody spills into the vault. It takes her a moment to realize she's hearing one of the Citari's symphonies, transmitted in its rawest form. The song carries a distant hum, overlaid by threads of notes that shift in intervals unfamiliarly beautiful. There's a depth to it that she can't grasp entirely, as though the Cetari built their music using scales deeper and subtler than human ears can normally perceive. It isn't just a single instrument or voice either. Entire layers of sound weave together, forming patterns that pulse at unpredictable intervals. The structure of the music reminds her faintly of light scattering through a prism. Complex, fragmented, yet undeniably cohesive. Her systems continue processing as more records upload. Hundreds, maybe thousands of compressed files she won't be able to open all at once. Just from scanning the summaries, she picks out other elements of Cetari life. Ceremonial practices encoded into visual holograms, multi-dimensional geometric art rendered into storage files, and even basic vocabulary frameworks that could serve as a linguistic bridge. Some of the records appear incomplete, the wear and tear of time evident in corrupted file headers, but much of it remains intact. Against every odd, the lattice not only survived, it waited intact for someone to connect. In those moments, Solara understands the enormity of the Cetari's creation. This wasn't a dusty vault, filled with the brittle remnants of a dead people. It was alive in ways she hadn't imagined. The lattice, though muted and mechanical by human standards, isn't cold circuitry or empty technology. It's filled with voices, with sounds and shapes crafted by beings who wanted not just to be remembered, but to exist beyond their bodies and cities. They didn't just encode data. They encoded wonder, sorrow, pride, and joy, the essential threads of what it means to live and create. She steps back from the terminal, letting the hum of the room settle into the background. The quiet now feels different, as though the vault isn't lifeless but breathing again, in slow, cautious exhales. The realization presses against her. The Cetari didn't vanish, not entirely. Through this lattice, through compressed light and memory, they're still here. Waiting wasn't about passivity, it was a declaration of faith that someday someone would find them and carry them forward. The ship logs the incoming files automatically, transferring them into secured storage to ensure no data is lost during the power fluctuations. All around her, the artifacts of the Cetari begin to intertwine with her reality. It's in the music humming faintly through her audio systems. It's in the shimmering patterns etched into the vault walls, now glowing brighter than before. It's in the understanding settling somewhere deep inside her, the intricate, ineffable depth of what she's found here. They didn't know who would answer the signal, they only knew someone might. And now here she stands, holding not just a piece of their history, but their very essence. The lattice was never meant to sit dormant. It was waiting, long past the point of despair, past silence, past extinction, for contact. For a long moment, Solara doesn't move. She listens to the echoes of the Cetari's voices vibrating faintly in the air, letting their lullabies sink into the quiet spaces between her own thoughts. The ship continues its task, pulling in the skeletal framework of a million lost memories, transforming them into something whole again. She draws in a deep breath, the tension in her chest easing as she looks back toward the terminal. The vault around her isn't an artifact of death anymore. It's a symphony of survival. Something in her knows there's no going back after this. The Cetari believed in memory, and in carrying their voices forward, they have, in their way, endured. Chapter 7. The Symphony of a Lost World. The first note rises softly in Solara's cockpit and drifts into the air like the traces of a forgotten dream. It's not a melody she can fully grasp, not immediately. Its tones shift unpredictably, dipping, rising, weaving through the quiet in ways human music never does. There's an uncanny beauty to it, but it also carries something else, intangible and ancient. It doesn't sound like an organized piece of music, rigid and purposeful. Instead, it feels like a living thing, breathing between each note. For the first time in days, Solara shuts her visor display and simply listens. The lullaby filters through the audio system, not loud but clear enough to fill the cockpit. The tones seem to hum against the silence, pulling her attention away from the cold glow of her monitors. It isn't noise, and it isn't chaos. It's calculated and deliberate, but not in the way human compositions are. Its structure bends expectations, rhythms smooth where they should be sharp, transitions wandering when they might otherwise resolve. It feels as if it was made for ears that no longer exist. A song crafted by beings who heard the world in wavelengths Solara can only dream of tuning into. And yet, beneath its alien qualities, it hums with something painfully familiar. A kind of longing. Her eyes drift back to the terminal, faintly glowing on her secondary display. The files that poured into her systems from the Cetari lattice scroll eternally, line after line of compressed data. Preserved holograms, language lexicons, artistic blueprints. Yet it's this haunting music that grips her. She wonders about the hands, or the forms, that once created these sounds. Did it emerge as a single voice or from an entire collective, their crystalline bodies refracting tones in unison, adding depth with every shared motion? It's a question she can't answer, though listening feels like connecting to that moment in some small, impossible way. The Cetari seem to know, even in their final days, that art and music hold a durability that outlasts the tangible. On Earth, humanity's oldest discoveries include cave paintings and carved flutes, objects that carried beauty even before they served function. Archaeologists once uncovered a 40,000-year-old bone flute in Germany, suggesting that the instinct to create music is as fundamental as survival itself. Ethaean's hologram said nothing explicitly about the Cetari's music, but now, hearing it in her own ears, the weight of what it represented feels undeniable. They didn't just want to preserve who they were, but the emotional gravity of their lives. The lullaby fades momentarily, then shifts as her audio system picks up another translated file, a different piece of music, this one layered and complex. Where the lullaby was haunting, this composition feels brimming with intensity. It reminds her of light scattering through water, broken into pieces but whole again when assembled. Polyrhythms echo across the cockpit, multiple melodies unraveling and weaving together in impossible combinations. It's not chaotic, though. It flows like fractals. A pattern endlessly repeating, Solara can't help but imagine how the Cetari must have experienced sound. Did they hear these harmonies simply as vibrations? Or could they see music, refracted as light through the crystalline cores of their cities? She opens another log, adjusting her position in the flickering low light of the ship. Her voice feels different as she presses record, softer, quieter, like even speaking might interrupt the Cetari's symphony. Voice log 72,491, she says, though she doesn't stick to protocol this time. The Cetari weren't gone. Not exactly. I think they must have known that stories alone wouldn't carry them into the future. They preserved more than their words. They gave us the things that made them alive, their art, their language, their music. She pauses, staring out at Adhara IV's surface far below, the ruins splitting faintly against the star's dim, pale light. I'm not entirely sure I can describe what it feels like to hear their voices. They aren't gone, not really. At least, not in the way we'd expect. They're still here. Somewhere. Her gaze flickers back toward the data still uploading to one of the back consoles, the files lined in patterns that pulse with faint light. Among them are sculptures, digital scans of intricate creations encoded into the lattice. Solara cycles through them, seeing alien contours rendered in vivid, rotating imagery. Some resemble structures, others shapes found in nature, like crystal formations from their forests. One even appears to depict a Centauri being, 4 appendages stretching upward, as though basking in the refracted glow of their sun. The scans are incomplete in places, static blurring edges. Like wounds left by time, but the remaining forms still feel deliberate. The Centauri made these not just to exist in the here and now, but to endure beyond themselves. Yet it's the language files that slow her scrolling the longest. Broken scripts, strange geometries, they fill her display in fragments. It's clear the Centauri used these glyphs to converge both language and art. Some patterns almost seem to mimic the rhythm of speech, or perhaps the movement of light. She wonders if these were carved by tools or sung into being, if their crystalline forms resonated to create these shapes naturally. Human language doesn't work like that, depending on partitioned sounds etched by tools or typed against flat text displays. But the Centauri's scripts seem intertwined with their way of experiencing the world, creating meaning through motion and reflection. The more she thinks on it, the more impossible it feels to separate the Centauri from their creativity. The lattice didn't hold a rigid catalogue of historical bullet points or raw statistics. Everything it contains radiates a shared intention, that art, music, and language were their civilization's lifeblood. She thinks of humanity's legacy, of similar parallels already visible across Earth's many ages. Humanity, too, creates to endure. In the 1970s, humanity launched the Voyager Golden Records, phonograph discs containing Earth's music, greetings in every spoken language, and other sounds meant to represent the whole of life on the planet. The Centauri may not have been able to scatter their lattice into the stars like those records, but their intention feels remarkably similar. Both species chose art as their thread into the unknown. Solara sits back, letting the patterns spill across her screen. The Centauri's world appears in glimpses now, the shine of crystalline forests refracting sunlight, suspended pathways that leaned into gorges, perhaps softly humming as their materials reflected the planet's breeze. She imagines what it felt like to walk those cities, where everything from light to vibration transformed into motion. Then she pictures the stillness left behind, the emptiness of those towers, the gleams fading with each passing century until the sands reclaimed what the Centauri once thrived within. Somehow, standing within that emptiness and hearing their music feels like holding both at once, the weight of loss tangled with the fragile resilience of what they left for someone or anyone to discover. The lullaby from earlier plays once more. This time, Solara doesn't interrupt it. The melody wraps the room, and despite its otherworldly tones, it feels comforting, grounding even in the immensity of where she is. It occurs to her then just how deeply personal this moment is. She's no longer just a field archivist tagging remnants of forgotten structures and moving on to the next sterile system. She's listening to the heartbeat of a people who refuse to be erased entirely, even when faced with extinction. Her voice breaks through the silence again as she records another note into the log. To whoever finds this, Adhara wasn't just a ruin. It's not infinite towers eaten by sand or hollow metal shreds. It's a voice, louder than its silence. She pauses as her chest tightens briefly, the melody softening in the audio around her. They're not gone, not really. We carry them now. The words linger in the dim glow of the cockpit, accompanied by the faint hum of Qatari tones. She closes her log, watching as thousands of files transfer into the ship's storage archives, their encryption bars flashing green. It'll take her days, maybe weeks, to comb through the full catalogue, but that doesn't weigh on her, not anymore. As she listens to the now familiar rhythms of the Centauri lullaby looping quietly again, a soft realization settles in. The Centauri weren't speaking to the void when they left their lattice behind. They were speaking to someone like her, someone willing to hear it, willing to carry it forward. The stars may feel cold and silent most of the time, but sometimes, when you listen closely enough, they sing. Chapter 8. Carrying the Legacy Forward. Solara sits in her dimly lit cockpit, watching the endless scroll of data across her screens. The Citari's legacy, compressed into impossible, elegant streams of light, now lives aboard her ship. Language, art, music, memories, all encoded, protected, waiting to be shared. The weight of it isn't easy to describe, not fear, not pressure, but a quiet, steady awareness of her role in something far larger than herself. It isn't just data she's carrying. It's the collective soul of a long-lost species. And for the first time in what feels like months, her mission isn't about cataloging the dead. It's about preserving the living. She activates the communications console and begins her final message to the Stellar Archives Initiative. The faint hum of the ship fills the silence while she composes her thoughts. "This is Solara Anwen," she starts, her voice softer than usual, as though the Citari's music, still humming faintly in the background, has altered her tone. Log entry 72,504. Confirmation of significant anomaly in the Adhara system. She pauses, realizing how clinical that sounds, how empty. This isn't a routine discovery. Her report needs to be more than numbers and status codes. For a moment she hesitates, then leans into what she's always shied away from, speaking not just as a field archivist, but as a human being. To whoever receives this, Adhara IV was not empty. It was not barren ruins or lost stone. It wasn't silence. The lullaby echoes faintly through the ship, wrapping her words as she speaks. The Citari preserved themselves in ways we can barely imagine. They didn't focus on survival in the physical sense, but survival in the way that matters, the parts of themselves that spoke, that connected, and that endured. The systems continue processing the files, each archive flooding into the Equinox's compressed data storage. Solara glances at the detailed logs filling her displays. Symphonies encoded in wavelengths, sculptures built from light, instructions for their language, their words shaped in rhythms and frameworks unlike anything Earth has ever known. The detail of it all feels overwhelming, but not in a disorienting way. It's staggering because it is so undeniably intimate. These are pieces of lives never meant to vanish completely. When the Cetari faced extinction, they could have fought for mere survival, clinging to the existence of their forms. Instead, they made the extraordinary choice to let their identities live larger than themselves. The idea isn't unfamiliar, even to us. Humanity has been quietly asking the same questions for centuries. When we're gone, what will remain? Archaeologists unearth monuments and artifacts, but these are only fragments, splinters of what made civilizations vibrant. Ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, for example, give us glimpses into their gods and rulers, but they can't tell us how a mother hummed her baby to sleep. Stone statues at Anatolia from 12,000 years ago still stand, but nothing about them explains the emotions of those who carved them. Our largest structures endure, but our most fragile ones, the music, the stories, the way sunlight catches in someone's hair, fade. The Cetari refused to let those pieces fade. As Solara speaks into her log, her gaze shifts to the planet below. The orange surface of Adhara IV stretches into shadow, and even from orbit, the towers of the ruins look impossibly small, tiny needles lost in a sea of dust. But she knows now what lies beneath. Underneath the wind and silence, the vault hums quietly in her mind. It no longer feels like a crypt of the forgotten. It's alive. It thrums with intention. The Cetari weren't erased. They chose to connect, to speak, even in the absence of anyone listening. This experience changes everything, Solara continues. Her voice steadies as she speaks, filling with something new. Not just awe, but purpose. We've always documented extinct civilizations like fading constellations, pinned points in history separated from us by time and distance. But Adhara IV proves something profound. A civilization isn't always confined to its physical life. Sometimes it can persist in ways we've never conceived. Their music isn't just sound, it's memory. Their language isn't just words, it's a bridge. She stops, her thoughts catching on the scope of it. Humanity, she thinks, might one day face a similar question. For all our achievements, our power, and our reach, we know how fragile life on Earth truly is. We store knowledge in vaults buried under Arctic ice. We record national treasures onto disks designed to resist centuries of decay. The Voyager Golden Records, launched aboard spacecraft in the late 20th century, were etched with greetings in 55 languages, sounds of animals, images of human life, and music. From Bach to Chuck Berry. That project was humanity's voice reaching out, hoping to persist. Solara wonders if, thousands of years from now, someone will find them, just as she's found the Centauri. Maybe they'll wonder about us, the same way she wonders now about the shimmering cities and crystalline trees. Her console flickers as the log finalizes, her words sealed and ready for transmission to the stellar archives. The task normally feels like closure, a clean end to a mission, but this time it feels different. She's sending more than coordinates and reports. She's sending a piece of herself. A mosaic of her own voice, now tangled with the Centauri's. Solara doesn't stop recording just yet. She hesitates, then adds something she hadn't planned. To whoever hears this story, whether it's days from now or centuries from now, remember that survival doesn't always mean holding on to the physical. Sometimes survival is memory. It's the music we leave behind, the stories we send forward, and the courage to speak, even when there's no one there to answer. She exhales, letting the words hang for one last moment before pressing the transmission button. A soft ping confirms the message has been sent. Somewhere far away, someone will hear it. She leans back in her seat, her gaze following the slow rotation of Adhara IV as her ship enters a higher orbit. The dark horizon of the planet creeps into view, marking the divide between light and shadow. But as the wind-scoured surface fades from sight, the Centauri aren't lost to her. It isn't the ruins she's thinking about, or the vault buried thinly beneath sand. The real legacy now lives in her ship, transmitted in waves and layers of memory too intricate to fully grasp in a single moment. And it's in her too, threading itself steadily deeper into every thought she's had since landing. For 91 days, she has moved from system to system in isolation, her work grounded in practical detachment. But as the cockpit glows faintly with the etched light of alien music, something has quieted inside her. She feels neither loneliness nor the dull monotony that had punctuated so much of her mission. Instead, there's a connection. Fragile, improbable, but real. The Centauri reveal that survival isn't measured in timelines or populations. It's found in preservation, in the persistence of light-filled patterns someone else will one day uncover. Her ship drifts forward. Isolation feels distant, replaced by something entirely new, a realization that life doesn't always end. It learns to echo. And if the echoes are strong enough, they're not just noise. They're songs waiting to be heard again. Epilogue. Civilization isn't just about surviving moment to moment. It's about deciding what's worth leaving behind. The Centauri understood this. When their world faded, they preserved the parts of themselves that mattered most. The songs, the stories, the essence of who they were. It makes you wonder, what would humanity choose? A melody, a piece of art, someone's whispered memory of home. The stars may seem quiet, but what if they're filled with echoes, just waiting for someone to hear them? Maybe, in the vast silence of space, the right question isn't only what we preserve, but who someday it might reach.